Hello and welcome to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 5 Countdown video. Today our analysts will be listing the top 5 compositions for patch 10.14. The meta has shifted dramatically due to the number of buffs to certain champions, most notably being Jarvan. This has influenced the meta quite heavily. Keep in mind though that the meta is always changes, and while the top end builds may remain consistent, there's always an ebb and flow for what's stronger or weaker. With that said, let's dive on in. But before we go back to the video, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video, and starting off our list, we have Vanguard Mystic coming in as the number 5 composition. Honestly, this spot is interchangeable with quite a few builds. The reason as to why Vanguard Mystic is the one getting it is mainly because of its consistency. It's a build that is strong enough into the current meta to consistently do well, but it's not going to win games anywhere near as often as the other top meta compositions. So if you're looking to play a consistent build that's good in the current meta, Vanguard Mystic is the build for you. Cassiopeia is still the main carry and damage source for this build, although there are a few tweaks that you can do. You can squeeze in Jarvan and another protector, or instead try to grab 4 Dark Stars with Shaco as the main carry, while Cassiopeia is the secondary. It's really a play what you find type of game at this point. The main reason for flexing out of either 2 Mystics or 2 Vanguard is mainly because of how good Jarvan is, so adding in either protector or Dark Star is always a viable choice. Within the build itself, you can also go 6 Vanguard if the lobby is heavily favoring physical damage carries like Shaco, Jhin, or Cybernetics. That's the nice thing about Vanguard Mystic, is that it can be flexible enough to match what the lobby is playing. Ultimately, the basic composition of 4 Vanguard, 4 Mystic with Cassiopeia carry is going to do well enough for consistent top 4s. Next up on the list is Cybernetics at the number 4 composition. Despite getting hit hard by the nerf bat, Cybernetics are still doing okay in the meta. They swing heavily some games, so you may find yourself going bottom 4 as much as you get a top 2, but when you're able to secure the champions and items for this build, you're generally going to place well. It's become a build that you don't really force anymore like you would have in 10.13, and instead go it when the opportunity presents itself or you're on certain galaxies. Binary Star, for example, is great for Cybernetics as well as Treasure Trove. As far as the composition itself goes, the core champions remain the same 6 Cybernetics, with the exception that instead of Vayne being the primary carry, you instead focus more on Aurelia. Echo is of course a good option as well, but as far as the mid game goes, you're more likely to lean on Aurelia. Vayne is still great to give items to, but try to focus on getting Aurelia items more so than Vayne. Those items are things like Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, Guardian Angel, Deathblade, and the Infiltrator Spatula item. Vayne can use any leftover 80 items. Echo uses any on-hit items quite well on top of other utility items. For the rest of your comp, you want to try to grab a Riven and Thresh, as they will give you Blademaster, Chrono, and Mana Reaver. Now we can talk about the top 3 builds for this patch. The first one to talk about is our number 3 composition, Star Guardian Sorcerer. The Star Guardian champions got huge buffs this patch, with most of them having their mana adjusted. Most notably was a buff to Syndra, who went down to 40 mana, then immediately got hotfixed to 50, but even after that adjustment, she's still doing well. That composition isn't as dominant as it was originally, but it's still doing great currently. Let's talk about the core concept of the build. Syndra is your carry and main damage dealer, so your overall goal is to protect and buff her. That means it's hard to really say what exact champions you should go because there's a lot of options. Because Syndra does a lot of damage on her own, you don't really need to prioritize 6 sorcerers anymore. You just want to buy some time for Syndra to ramp up with her orbs. That means you want to lean more heavily into Star Guardian, but even then you don't need the full 6 for Syndra to carry. It's probably not a surprise, but Jarvan with Nico is actually fantastic as a solid frontline and a way to buff your Syndra. The attack speed is always helpful. Along those same lines, you can grab a Janna later on to make your Star Guardians do true damage with their auto attacks while also providing her own attack speed buff to them. She also provides great crowd control. You may see this concept for this composition now: buff, CC, and protect. That's why it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what you want to do each game. The default is 6 Star Guardian with 4 sorcerers, but that's not always going to be consistent enough. Protectors, Mystic, and Janna are all easily worth adding in and mainly dependent on what the rest of the lobby is playing. Just keep in mind that you want to grab blue buff, death cap, and a defensive item for Syndra. When you have those things secured, just fill in your composition as needed, with the core concepts being protecting Syndra, buffing her, and having good CC. Next up on our list is the number 2 composition, Protectors. Yep, Protectors are back. It's almost entirely because of one champion, Jarvan. Actually, it's entirely because of him, though the build wasn't doing that poorly in the previous meta. But with 10.14, Jarvan received several buffs such as more health, lower total mana, and the attack speed buff of his ability got increased. Whew. That is a lot for one champion, and it's no surprise that he's taken over the meta. That means protectors are a hot commodity right now as you want to play around the Jarvan. Your core champions are going to be Jarvan, Neeko, Rakan, and Xin Zhao. Later on, you can add in an Urgot if you want, or even turn certain champions into a protector like Cassiopeia or Aurelion Sol, but to keep it simple, just use the core 4 champions. From there, you really can go into almost anything. As mentioned in Star Guardians, you can look to play Syndra carry with protectors, or you can go for Darkstar with Shaco carry, or later on Xerath. Hell, you can even steal Cassiopeia and go Protector Mystic with her as the carry. That's the beauty of this composition. As long as you have Jarvan and 3 other protectors, you can play whatever you need based on the lobby. It is worth pointing out that it may be difficult to find Jarvan. He is highly contested, particularly in the early game, so finding him is not always viable. We suggest not forcing any build too hard if you're not able to secure him early on in the game, because finding him later will be even more difficult. But if you get an early Jarvan, specifically Jarvan 2, the world is your oyster, meaning you can go whichever build you need to. One last thing to talk about is what items to look for. There's a lot of utility items that you can grab, like Frozen Heart for Rakan or Ionic Spark for Neeko, but hands down the best item is Warmogs. The amount of health it provides makes the protector shield ridiculously large, so always try to secure a Warmogs for your Jarvan if possible. It'll keep him alive for quite a while, and if you have it early game, it's often enough for Jarvan to solo carry fights. Alright, we are on to our last top 5 composition. Coming in at number 1 on the list is Darkstars. This one was pretty obvious, wasn't it? While Jarvan got a lot of buffs, so did basically every other Darkstar unit. Mordekaiser, Karma, Shaco, and Jhin all got buffed this patch, so it's no surprise that Darkstar has risen to the tippity top. Of course, Jarvan's buff is a huge factor for the success of this build, but cumulatively, it's all of the changes that really make it shine. To start off, let's go over the typical 6 Darkstar composition. Shaco, Jhin, and Xerath are your primary carry options, with Jarvan, Mordekaiser, and Karma filling in the other 3 spots. From there, you can go quite a few things, but a common pair of champions at level 8 are Lulu and Ashe. This provides you Sniper, Celestial, and Mystic. Rakan is also an option in the early and mid game for Celestial plus Protector. Now let's talk about your carries. Really, it depends on what items you have and what other players are doing in your lobby. Shaco loves sword items like Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge, Guardian Angel, and Deathblade, and is an all-around strong carry. He's a bit weaker into heavy CC teams though, so in that case you may prefer Jhin. Jhin also likes swords, but gloves as well, with items like Last Whisper, Deathblade, and Infinity Edge being the best for him. Lastly, if you want strong AoE and have an extra Rage Blade to hand out, you can go Xerath carry. He's not as easy to make work as the other 2, as you really want a Xerath 2, and that's not always the easiest to procure. Overall, when it comes to Darkstars, you can play whatever you need to. You can also play a whole range of builds utilizing just 4 Darkstar, so don't limit yourself to the core composition of 6. Builds like Protector Darkstar or Sniper Darkstar Astro become possibilities with several others. Basically, pick one of Shaco, Jhin, and Xerath and build your compositions around them as your main carry. Do keep in mind that the Darkstar champions are quite contested right now, and while it's a flexible enough composition with 3 carries, you may not always be able to run it if too many other players are contesting. That is going to be it for our top 5 compositions for patch 10.14. We're not quite done yet though, as we have a couple of honorable mentions to go over. Up first on our honorable mentions list is Rebels, or more commonly referred to as Jinx carry. This was the build of 10.13, and you couldn't go a game without seeing 3 or even 4 players fighting for Jinx. So what happened? Well, Jinx got a small nerf, and Aurelion Sol got a couple of nerfs as well, so they aren't as strong as they were in 10.13. But honestly, this composition is not bad, it's just not as consistent as it once was. It can still do well with either 6 Rebel or Rebel Brawler, but you have to high roll just a bit. It will struggle into current meta compositions like Darkstar, because Shaco getting into your backline easily is just not great, and Jhin doing too much damage for your champions to survive. Syndra is also scary to play against because she can randomly one-shot your Jinx. Ultimately, this build relies on keeping your Jinx alive. It's not always easy to do, which is why 6 Rebels tends to be the better option with the extra shielding. But if you can keep her alive and grab yourself an Aurelion Sol too, you may have a shot of getting a 1st or 2nd place finish. And our second honorable mention is Xayah carry, or as it was originally known as, Shredder. For sure, everyone remembers when this build was strong, and it's back again in 10.14 after the, you guessed it, buffs to Jarvan. Xayah also received a buff as her attack speed went up to 0.9 from 0.8, which is a quite significant buff as attack speed scales the higher the base amount is. So with Jarvan and Xayah being strong again, it's no surprise the build has risen in popularity again. The reason as to why it's down here in the honorable mentions is, well, consistency. It's not always doable because reroll compositions aren't as reliable as they once were. Plus, well, Jarvan is ridiculously contested and getting him 3-starred or even 2-starred may prove difficult. There are 2 variations now that you can go for this build, so you either get 3 Blade Master with 4 Celestial like the old build, or you play 6 Blade Master. Both are viable and really just depend on what you're finding after you have Xayah 3 and hopefully a Jarvan 3. Overall, it's a viable composition in the meta, and as we said at the beginning of the list, there's a lot of compositions at the lower end of the meta that are still strong. They aren't just as strong as Dark Stars or Protectors. That is going to be it for today's video, folks. This was definitely a big shake up to the meta after the relatively stale end of 10.13. And as we stated already, keep in mind that the meta is always shifting, so what's viable today may not be as viable tomorrow. Let us know in the comment section below what builds you've been climbing with, and if there's anything you think should have made the top 5. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.